it's Mathew, and thank you sincerely for helping this podcast grow well past 12,000 downloads in just a couple of months. It gives me the ability to keep bringing you this podcast every single week, which I love. Every single day of my life now, I'll get an email, a text, a phone call, a DM on social media from someone who knows my journey. And by the way, if you don't, Series 1, Episode 9. And now they feel comfortable coming to me to ask where I would recommend they go. Where would I send my friends? And I'm going to answer that question in just a moment. But first up, I want to say that you might have noticed we've added a weekly show called R4V, Reserved for Vets. It's with Dr. Dave, who's a psychiatrist, and Chad from Mental Joe Apparel. And while it's reserved for vets, it's certainly wide open to anybody who's connected to them as well. We pretty much hit the mental health of vets from every single angle. From pills to talk therapy to psychedelics, we go there, and it's good. So feel free to check that out each Wednesday. We actually stream it live on the Learn From People Who Lived It YouTube channel if you want to check that out. And we all know that Learn From People Who Lived It is always going to be about those stories that we connect to, that help us feel less alone, that encourage us to talk about it ourselves. But I also wanted to add some interviews with people like, cardiologist, shaman, massage therapist, psychiatrist, and a fun chat with a guy I like a lot, Johan Hari. You can hear him in episode 6, I believe. Series 3 has a brand new partner.
Fear tells me I can't go do something creative with my wife. I can't give her a hug. She may reject me.
It's actually not something wrong with you. It's not that you're broken. It's not that there's anything bad about you. It's just a normal physiological response, but it's on overdrive. So we got to turn down the alarm system.
So that's Dr. Camilla Pekka and Francis, and together they make up a growing space. Two of the most gifted people I've had the pleasure to meet in a long time. She's a psychologist with a PhD who has this almost magic touch with regard to helping people break free from all kinds of trauma. And as a domestic violence survivor herself, she knows the power of breaking free from that story and getting into that growth state as she talks about it. Together they have a program that I believe in with my whole heart. That's why they are a partner here for Series 3. If you're stuck, if you want a little help, I'm telling you right now to text the word LEARN to 623-202-4553. I'm going to put that in the show description as well, but they've got this 100% intentional program that will have you feeling like yourself again. It'll get you back to moving and creating and doing things again. Yes, you. So text that word LEARN to 623-202-4553, and you're going to hear back shortly from a growing space. Doesn't matter where you live, they can help you if you want that help. Text LEARN to 623-202-4553. They've got a few programs to fit a budget and fit a time frame. Let these guys guide you that life you seriously deserve for yourself. And thank you, Camilla, and thank you, Francis, for your partnership of Series 3. I know my audience is in very good hands. All right, I'm excited to share this first episode with you. Dude's name is Sam, and he's going to own your heart when he's done. Enjoy.
Looking for no bullshit conversation about mental health? Find Learn From People Who Lived It wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn From People Who Lived It.
Welcome to another episode of Learn From People Who Lived It.
No matter how different someone's story is, there's so many common themes across everybody, which to me says there's a million people out there who have those common themes in their life too. And so I know there's a lot of people getting a lot of stuff out of this. So I'm excited to tell another story today.
Well, that's Dr. Frank. Hi, I'm Mathew Blades, and welcome to Series 3, Episode 1. Let's start where we always do. Your name and age.
Sam, and 37.
All right, what story are you here to share today, man?
Just my life story in my childhood, like just growing up in a really rough environment, a lot of trauma, and then just the growth that I experienced like later on in life, and how your past doesn't have to equal your future.
That's a good way to put that. Who do you hope hears our conversation today?
I hope people hear it that are in the same place that I was, stuck, struggling, feeling like you're not going to amount to anything, just feeling like your past just destroyed everything that you hoped for.
A lot there, huh? We're going to get into it right now. Welcome to our episode number 1. This is Series 3, Ep 1 with Sam. Dr. Frank, welcome to the conversation.
Good to be here.
It is going to be great to sit down and visit with this guy. And normally we start with the first 10 years of people's lives, but I'd like to try something new in this Series 3, which is to start with where you are now. How are things now in your life as a result of doing some of the work that you've done?
Unbelievable, I guess would be an easy way to put it, is like I'm doing things currently that I didn't fully believe were possible. I just got to connect with Mathew not too long ago and just let him know that I did a speaking gig where I got paid more than I could have ever dreamed of. I got paid like 7 months of my salary in 1 hour. And
boy.
Yeah. It was crazy and so much fun. I feel like I got into a flow state, like when I was speaking. I had a professional speaker come up to me afterwards. I would deem somebody a professional. He does this for a living. I do this on the side. He came up to me afterwards. He put his finger in my chest and he said, "I know you hear this all the time, but you're incredible." He's like, "Your passion ignites everything that you're talking about." And I would say that people have told me that throughout my life, but because of my difficult past, I just didn't believe it. I mean, I heard it and I was like, yeah, you're right. But then I thought, yeah, but I'm an idiot. I'm stupid. I don't know what I'm doing. And it was just something about that moment. But that's a piece of my life. Another piece of my life is we just had a little baby girl and I'm a dad and I always wanted to be a dad. And so like, I'm just proud. I'm proud to hold her. I'm proud to just like be a part of her life. And I'm working on becoming a better husband. Like, I think I was a good husband, but I think I did a lot of dumb stuff that like hurt my wife. And I'm working on that as well. And I'm working for this incredible company, Dutch Bros Coffee. And like, I'm getting to live in my strengths. I'm getting to build a future that I want to exist. And so for me, that's just like, so some other things that I've gotten to do over the past few years. I got to do a TEDx talk at ASU West and that was nuts. Having my nephew tell me, "Hey, we watched your TED talk in my high school class." I was like, wait a minute, people are watching this? Like,
yeah.
And then I got to speak to the Arizona Diamondbacks. There's a guy there, Joe Walsh, that's the head of HR. And they did this thing called the Leadership Initiative. And the first time I got invited, it was kind of like, "Hey, my boss couldn't make it." And so he's like, "Hey, could you go?" And I was like, "I'd love to go." I go. And then they did a survey at the end of the year and they're like, "You're the best speaker we've ever had. Like, come back." And so I go back a second time and then they're like, "Come back a third time." And I'm just like, this is the kid that barely graduated high school, that's dyslexic, that can't figure out how to like do math. But it's not about those things. It's about connecting with people. And so I continue, like I told Mathew before, one day I'm going to own a ranch and I'm going to do respite with horses and animals and I'm going to help people that are struggling. And like, if I go back to 10 years ago and I say those things, I would have laughed myself out of the room. I'd have been
Even though you were doing the work you were doing, because you were a youth minister for a little while where you're trying to really be impressionable on people. So even back then you wouldn't have totally believed it, huh?
No, I mean, I always wanted to do something incredible. But I think I would always hold myself to a standard of like, you're not going to be able to make this work. Like, you're not smart enough to figure this out. You're not capable of doing this stuff that you want to do. And I kind of grew up in that environment of like, we're in ministry, we're never going to have a lot of money. And so I kind of just accepted like, I'm never going to make money. I'm just going to do something that I love, but never have money. And so that means I'm not going to have all the things that I want,
Yeah, I want to bring in Dr. Frank right away. And I just want to ask you your own thoughts on money, your own relationship with money. One of my favorite books ever, because it changed the game for me, was that Robert Kobayashi book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
Where he basically, explains the two differences between the fathers.
Mm-hmm.
What does the psychology say about money and our relationship to it?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you polled most people who are kind of like middle class, you almost get this like disdain for people who have a lot of money or make a lot of money. And I personally feel like at least part of that there's, if I can say, there's a jealousy there, right? I don't think I'm ever going to have it, so I'd rather hate the person that does. And so, a lot of times people will say to themselves things like you said, right? Like, well, at least I enjoy what I'm doing, right? You know, other people sold their soul to make a whole bunch of money. I'm not doing that. I'm doing something meaningful, or I'm happy, whatever that is. And then there's the crowd of people who just think that they'll never do anything that they enjoy anyway, and they're just going to do something for a paycheck and, you know, what have you. But there are so many layers to that. But how cool is it when you can like make some money? And by the way, like, money is cool. I'm pro. I would rather have money than not have money, right? You know, mo money, mo problems. I would rather have those problems and figure them out than not have enough money and have to figure out those problems, right? So yeah, I'm on the side of like, if you bring value to something, get paid for that value that you're bringing. And if you love what you're doing along the way, like, that's the dream.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. Now we get to do what we do best here on this podcast, which is to jump into the journey that led you to this point.
Yeah.
Because this is where really all the magic happens, because you had to overcome a lot of different belief systems, and all at the hands of a pretty angry dude on the way up.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good to start with just like my parents split up when I was super young. And that would be like 3. My dad had an affair, left my mom. I just remember my mom growing up, like, just like being like nervous about just being a single mom and having 3 kids. I remember her like putting my dad's boots on the porch so that somebody would think that there was a guy home. You know what I mean? Like that fear of like, I don't want people to think I'm just a woman here with these 3 kids, like little kids. She started dating, and she had a few cool boyfriends, and then she had this one that lived in Phoenix. We lived in Winslow, and this dude, we were at a park in Phoenix, and I was a little kid. I was probably like 4 and a half, and I'm running around the park, and my mom says, "Hey, it's time to go," and I'm like, "No," and then she's like, "Hey, it's time to go," and I'm like, "No." And this dude walks over and grabs me and flips. He holds me by my ankles, and he just starts swatting me. And I'm like, this guy is a stranger. He doesn't know me. I don't know him. He's just swatting me, holding me upside down. I'm screaming. I'm crying. I want my mom. He's like, no. He finally flips me right side up and then just like bear hugs me, and I can't get loose. And, I just remember going back to his house. We went back to his house, and I refused to go in at 4 years old. They were like going inside, and I'm like, I hate this guy. I don't know anything about him. Like, he just abused me. And it was crazy. I mean, I wouldn't go in the house, and my mom was like, you can't stay out here. And I'm like, I'm not going in. And so I just remember just staying in the car, and they probably only stayed for 20, 30 minutes. And then they came out and we left, and she didn't marry that guy. And I was super grateful. But years later, she met my stepdad, and he has a long storied past and a long history of trauma. And their relationship was really tough. Their relationship, I would probably describe like fire and gasoline. Like they just didn't know how to be close and how to communicate well. And so I grew up in a very like aggressive household, a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling. I was the middle child, and I would always do something to break a rule or to like do something wrong. And my stepdad would get frustrated, and he would be like, okay, now I'm going to swat you. And what would take place typically is my mom being like this, like mothering, like protective. She would try to get in the way and be like, no, don't swat him. And there would just ensue this gnarly fight between the two of them. My stepdad would feel disrespected. My mom would just, I like to think that like it would probably last a couple hours and yelling and screaming. I would eventually...
You have to sit here and endure this whole thing.
Literally, I would try to get in the middle of it because I didn't like it, and I was scared. I didn't want my mom to get hurt. And then when I would get in the middle of it, I would get told, go to your room, which second story. And I would just lay on the floor and cry and hear them yelling, hear things getting broken, and just knowing that when all of that was done, that he was going to come upstairs and he was going to swat me. And when I say swat me, he built a paddle out of a 1x4, and he drilled holes in it so it would go faster. And he like whittled the handle down so he could get a grip on it, and then drilled like a hole in the handle and put like a little wristband on it so he could spin it around his wrist. And I mean, he would just light me up. I mean, it was rough. And this was happening probably I mean, of course, from a child's mind, it felt like 2 times a week. If you talk to my stepdad or my siblings, they might say it was less frequent, but it felt like the majority of my young adult life, I was just getting super harsh discipline.
What do you think about, Frank, as you digest that?
Well, there's a lot of people that talk about like, oh, kids are soft these days because, you know, when I was younger, like if I screwed up, like, you know, my dad would swat me or whatever. But like usually what that person means is his dad would take his hand and swat him on the ass.
Right.
Right. And like it may have hurt and it may have stung. And I'm not condoning that one way or another, but like that is different than like that dude built a weapon basically to like kick your ass.
Yeah.
Like that is a different level that like no one should look at that and be like, yeah, like that kid totally deserved that. Like, no, that is beyond what is ever needed.
Right.
I remember growing up, man, and it was the snap of the belt.
Yep.
I got
my
the belt.
Dad would come in.
Didn't love it. But.
Snap that belt a few times that way and make that. You were like, oh God, here we go.
Yeah.
Here we go. And what's interesting about it, and Dr. Frank has this great perspective on beating our kids. And he does. And basically what he suggests is that we have to be ready to kill our children if we want to use physical punishment as the means to teach them.
We're going to need a little bit of context because you're right. That is kind of the punchline.
That is the punchline. But yes, let's walk them up to it. It's important. This is why we're here.
I forgot we have talked about this before. Right.
Yeah.
So the idea that like, you know, we almost get accustomed to whatever kind of punishment we receive, right? If like I remember there were times where like I would say something at the dinner table and my dad would reach over and just kind of like, you know, swat me across the face, right? And it's like, you know, you get a little older and all of a sudden that swat across the face doesn't hurt anymore. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's like, oh, all right, if I can say something mean about my sister and I can just take one to the face, like might totally be worth it. Right. And so, and there were calculated risks that I took. But the idea is that essentially, like, because we become accustomed to whatever that punishment is, that punishment needs to get more and more severe over time, almost like alcoholism, right? You know, 2 beers used to get me on the floor, and now it takes 10, right? Yeah. So the idea is that once you start that physical abuse kind of train, eventually you have to get all the way up to like beating someone half to death or literally to death. Like that's just how the escalation goes. Matthew,
using physical punishment exclusively.
Right. Yeah. But when you start at the end, like,
I know it's aggressive, isn't it?
It is.
But I want to get people's point because I honestly, I don't remember, you know, and I've even heard people toss this around to make themselves feel better. Oh, well, he deserved that beating. Or, you know, people would throw that shit around. It's like, oh, he deserved that. You kidding me?
Yeah.
I've got children of my own. They're 16 and 13 right now. There's never, as crazy as they might have acted up until this age, and as many times as I may have wanted to lay a hand, there was never a time they deserved to actually get the shit beat out of them for the moment.
Yeah.
There was always an opportunity to learn and to teach. But that's the thing, right? Like our parents didn't have the tools then.
Yes.
They didn't have the capacity. They didn't have the wherewithal. Nobody was in their ear going, well, just sit Sam down and explain to him what he did wrong.
Right.
Nobody did that.
Right.
And so, you know, I know that when I was in my retreat, my psychologist said that if you grow up in a home with abuse, you grow up in a home feeling unsafe, and you grow up with a distorted view about what love is. Does that connect with you?
Oh, man. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to bring rap into it. I mean, have you heard Fear off of Kendrick Lamar's album Damn? Mm-hmm. The whole beginning of the song is literally him from his mom's voice saying, I'll beat your ass if you do that. I'll beat your ass if you do that. I'll beat your ass. I'll beat your ass again if you say, like, just everything. And then she says, if you don't fear me, you're going to fear, if you don't fear this, you're not going to fear anything else. Like, it's just that instilling that control and that fear. And that it wasn't as much as like a form of like, I'm going to just hurt you. It was like, I'm going to win. Like it was a battle of wills, and it was a battle of like, and Stephen Covey in 7 Habits just said it so well. He's like, if you as a human, like an adult person is going to fight a child, you're bigger than they are, you're stronger than they are, you're smarter than they are, you will win every single time. Yeah. There's no doubt if you fight a child, you will win. Yeah. And that's just what happened. And I mean, like I said, I've been able to build the relationship with him currently and just start to realize there's layers of abuse that he, like you said, he didn't have the tools and he was just doing what he knew how. He was a hurt person trying to like solve his problems. And, you know, like that saying says, like when you're a hammer, all you see is nails. And it was like, I just got to solve this problem.
Is there some psychology equivalent to the inner child, or is it all in one the same?
I mean, you can just kind of call it what it like. It's modeling, right? Like, this is what I see. This is what I'm going to repeat. Like, it doesn't have to be fancier than that. We repeat what we learn.
Yeah, sure. I like the word modeling. Can you expand on it in terms of what you know?
We've talked to so many people that have said something to the equivalent of, I didn't know this was not normal until and then fill in the blank, right? Maybe until I got to school and I talked to other kids, or maybe until I went away to camp and then I met this friend who, whatever, like there becomes some contrast at some point in your life. And then you have to kind of like look at your own and be like, oh, this thing isn't normal. Not everyone has to experience this. But up until then, that's just what you know.
Yeah.
And so you grow up with this one-dimensional view, but in your head, like, you know this isn't cool. You know this isn't right. I mean, as a 4-year-old, you knew it wasn't right.
Yeah.
And you know what else has kind of struck me as Dr. Frank was talking? The other unique thing about this is that none of us are little people, right? None of us are like little guys, right? We're all three pretty large gentlemen. You know, all of us over 6'3".
Yeah.
You know, over 200
I'm only
pounds.
6'2".
You are?
Yeah.
Oh,
Is there a 6'3" club that I'm not in here?
You're not in. But what's interesting about that is you grow up, and I don't know if you guys experience this as a whole, but when you're really tall, people treat you different. They treat you like you're older. They treat you like you know more. Yeah. There is a certain level of responsibility that comes with having height. Apparently.
Tall people, coming back to the money thing, funny story. Tall people actually make more money over the course of their career. Just because
that's the thing.
There's this authority or like presumed authority that comes with being tall.
Right. Well, and a perceived toughness that comes with it, right? But you and I have talked about this before, Sam, is that you and I both grew up pretty sensitive children.
Yep.
Really sensitive to our environment and what was going around him.
Yep.
Frank hasn't cried once in his life yet, so he doesn't understand what this is about. But
there was like a commercial that I cried out loud. Are you kidding me?
I love that.
But you know what I mean? You're growing up in this environment and it's tough, right? I wanted to know, what's your mom like in these instances? What's your family situation? Is anybody else stepping in to kind of be like, whoa, time out? Or because this happens late at night, does nobody see it?
Yeah. My mom, bless her heart, man, she was the sweetest woman and she loved me so much. And man, really looking at it, I see how it shaped who I am. My mom loved me and she was trying to love her husband at the same time. And she was torn. Do I love my son? Do I love my husband? What a difficult place to be. I think she loved me as much as she could. And then when those moments happened and they had those huge fights, she would try to stand up for me. It got to the point, honestly, when I was older, that I would beg her to stop. I could tell she was getting pissed and I could tell that it was going to go bad. And I would run in and be like, Mom, please stop. You're going to make it worse. Like, just let him swat me. Let him do whatever he needs to do. Let him discipline me. But like, I swear, if you jump in here and try to stop this, you're going to make it so much worse for me. Like, but she cared so much. I'll throw in some Enneagram language here. Like, I'm a 2 on the Enneagram, which means like, I feel like I have to work for love. I have to do things to be loved. And so I just think that a lot of that comes from my mom not being able to say, hey, I love you. Like, I have to choose. So I'm like, well, if I be good, then she'll love me. I've got to work for that affection and that love in my life. And man, that was tough. But I would always attribute my mom to being super loving, super, like, she was always hugging on us and just being affectionate for us. And man, she and her side of the family is really where I learned what love looked like.
Really?
Yeah. My uncles, oh man, They were incredible. They were the dads that I never had. They would take me hunting, take me fishing. One of my favorite stories, my Uncle Chris, we went bird hunting. And I mean, I was a kid. I shot all my shells in my 20 gauge and I had nothing left. And my Uncle Chris handed me his shotgun, his 12 gauge. And he said, Sam, you take it. And I was like, Uncle Chris, like, I can't take your gun. You got to shoot. And he said, I've hunted my whole life. It's time for you to hunt. And I mean, what a level of love to just like let somebody else have joy, even though like he was like missing out on the fun. But yeah, those guys for me, like they were so sweet.
Do you have a relationship with them still?
I do. We live far away, but I always try to, whenever I get an opportunity to talk to them and tell them how much they mean to me, I always do, because I just need them to know, like, and honestly, Mathew, like, I am the uncle that I am to my nephews and nieces because of them. Like, I try so hard to love my nephews and nieces and always just make sure that they know, like, hey, I see you. Yeah. I see where you're at. I see what you're going through, and I love you and I care about you. And let's go to lunch with Uncle Sam. And like, you can just tell me what's going on in your life. You don't have to church it up or like tell me, like, you don't have to, you can give me the real truth. Where are you at? You know, like, no judgment.
Little sneak peek at episode 2 coming up in a second. Hang on.
We have 3 goals with Learn from People Who Lived It. 1, to help you feel less alone. 2, encourage you to seek out a coach, a therapist, a church, anyone who can help you get through your journey and find some healing. 3, when you're ready, share your story with us.
Find Learn from People Who Lived It wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from People Who Lived It.
Here's what's coming up in episode number 2 with Sam.
And when they finally got to the 90s, this lady described Tupac, and it was the most incredible thing. She said Tupac was so complex. Like, in one song, he like loved women and he was like so uplifting. And in the next song, he was like talking so disrespectful about women. Like, he's not good or bad. He's both.
Yeah.
And man, when she said that, I felt it in my soul. Like, yes, there's parts of me that I'm so proud of, and there's parts of me that I'm like, man, you've overcome.
Yeah.
And then there's parts of me that I'm like, you got a lot of work, dude.